Hi there, I'm the_twig and I like analysing game rules. So the Player's Handbook Playtest 5 had 5 whole classes in it. Unfortunately there's no monk, which is the one I was most looking forward to, but oh well. I'm going to start by looking at the sorcerer in this video, because it's one of my 2 favourites of the updates. So there's a lot of changes here, including new sorcerer only spells, updates to almost all of the metamagics, and considerably more spells known. For any of you who have been following along with this playtest, I did not misspeak there. Sorcerers have spells known. In previous playtest UAs, all of the spellcasters have been prepared spellcasters, including things like the Bard. That decision seems to have been backtracked because the sorcerer once again has a number of spells in a static list that can only change when they level up. Annoyingly, the playtest still calls this prepared spells, however, for this video I'm going to call them spells known, because that's what they are. In 2014, the sorcerer had 2 spells known at first level and gained 1 extra at every level until 11th, when they become more sporadic. They ultimately maxed out at 15 spells known. This new sorcerer also starts with 2 spells, but learns more much more quickly, meaning that they max out at 22 spells known. If we take a snapshot of, say, I don't know, level 10, which is probably around endgame for the majority of campaigns, old sorcerer had 11 spells, new sorcerer has 15. This is a huge improvement. Looking at this on a more macro scale of all classes being prepared versus the prepared and known dichotomy, I think that I like the dichotomy more. It gives more individuality to the classes, and given that there are now 4 classes using the arcane spell list, helps to differentiate them a lot more. The only class that I kind of hope changes is the ranger, because I think that should have always been a prepared caster. On the subject of the arcane spell list though, sorcerers use the arcane spell list. One of my really big hopes with the sorcerer was that they would let us choose our spell list. I've seen a lot of sorcerers with backstories saying that they're, I don't know, demigods, or they were born during a torrential storm, or something along those lines. For those sorts of sorcerers, I think that divine or primal lists would be better suited. But because all sorcerers are arcane casters, let's just look at the arcane list. The new arcane list is a lot bigger than the old sorcerer list. In total, they've actually only lost 8 spells, and they've gained 91. The spells that they've lost aren't really that major. The best ones are probably Enhance Ability, Dominate Beast, and Earthquake. As for the gains, there are a ton of good ones. I shortlisted 31 which I consider noteworthy. Amongst those, the headlines are probably Armour of Agathis, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Phantom Steed, Wall of Force, Force Cage, Simulacrum, Maze, Foresight, and True Polymorph. There's a bunch of other good ones too, covering a huge range of functions. If you want to see a full spreadsheet comparison, I've put a link in the description, so you can have a look at that. Last thing to note at the Sorcerer spellcasting is that they now have ritual casting. All classes have rituals now, but for the sorcerer that gives them free castings of things like Detect Magic, Find Familiar, Layman's Tiny Hut, and Rary's Telepathic Bond. Overall, this is a huge expansion to the versatility of the sorcerer, which I think is probably deserved. Next I want to look at the actual never-before-seen new spells that the sorcerer gets. There are 4 of them. Sorcerer's Burst is a cantrip, Sorcerer's Vitality is a 3rd level spell, Arcane Eruption is a 4th level spell, and Sorcery Incarnate is a 5th level spell. The sorcerer learns them for free as soon as they are able to cast them, for example 5th level for Sorcerer's Vitality. Starting with the cantrip, Sorcerer's Burst is an attack roll which does 1d6 of your choice of damage type from a fairly good range. Thunder is here, and that's normally one of the best damage types in the game. If you roll a 6 on your damage dice, you get to roll another damage die, and then another one if you roll another 6, and then you keep going until you stop rolling 6s, or you've rolled a number of 6s equal to your ability modifier. In other games this is called exploding dice, so that's what I'm going to call it here. It's actually fairly hard to work out the expected damage from this spell, due to the combination of that ability score maximum and the fact that you roll more initial dice as the cantrip scales. You can show, however, that exploding d6s tend towards an average of 4.2, so this is ultimately slightly worse than a d8 cantrip with no additional effect. That means that it's not great, but it is a very fun and high-rolly cantrip. I've noticed several features in this UA which cater specifically towards people who find rolling crits or max damage exciting, so I actually have no complaints about this. I'm absolutely fine with a spell which caters to fun being in the game. Sorcerer's Vitality is next, and it's a 1-action self-targeted healing spell which heals 2d6 plus ability mod, and then also cures blinded, deafened and poisoned. For a 3rd level slot, that's not great. However, it is a free known spell. You're not really losing anything by having it sit on your character sheet, and it may come up once in a while. Arcane Eruption is the 4th level spell, and this one is actually pretty good. It's a 20-foot radius blast spell which does 66 damage from the same types as Sorcerer's Burst. You then pick one of the numbers rolled and apply an effect to everyone who failed their save until the end of your next turn. In general, the lower the number, the better, which I think is a really nice balance. If you roll really high, then you get to do lots of damage, but if you roll low, then you get to do a good effect. That's the idea at least. In practicality, with 66, you're likely to have at least one low roll no matter what. I'm calculating a 66.51% chance to incapacitate and a 99.86% chance to poison or better. I'd be pretty happy with that, I think. It's not banishment or polymorph levels of good, but it's a pretty solid blast spell. The last one is 5th level Sorcery Incarnate. This is a 1-minute concentration bonus action, which gives you advantage on all spell attack rolls, allows you to use 2 Metamagics on every spell, and immediately gives you 1d4 sorcery points. I'm not convinced by this one. The fact that it's a bonus action cast means that you can't cast any other leveled spells on the same turn, so it has to be a setup for next turn. As a caster with access to spells like Web, Telekinesis and Greater Invisibility, advantage is fairly easy to get, and spell attacks generally aren't that great compared to saving throws anyway. You could also get 5 sorcery points by just burning the spell slot. That means that the main benefit to this must be using 2 Metamagics. While there are definitely some good options for this, such as a careful, subtle fireball, I don't think it's worth a 5th level spell slot. You may have seen that Chaos Bolt is also here, but the only changes I can see to that are that it's now a Sorcerer unique spell, and the undulating mass is no longer warbling. Sorcerer also gets it for free at 1st level. Now onto Font of Magic. The major change here is that the spell slots you can make are now based on your Sorcerer level. That's probably a good decision. You could previously make 4th and 5th level spell slots earlier than you were supposed to, which had some implications when upcasting things like Fly and Banishment. You could also twin those though, which was cheaper, so I'm actually not sure how much it ultimately mattered. On the subject of twinning, you get Metamagic at 2nd level now, although I'm going to look at the other class features first, then circle back to it. Sorcerer's Restoration has moved down from 20th level to 15th level and has also been buffed. You now gain 4 sorcery points whenever you roll initiative or finish a short rest. Whilst I see what they're going for, this has 2 issues for me. First, it's abusable with the Bag of Rats. For anyone unfamiliar, the idea is that you can just carry around a bag of rats and then fight them all to regain your resources. In this case, you would engage and roll initiative with something, regain your sorcery points, and then run away and repeat. This is fairly easy for the DM to rule against, but it's just not great to see. The other issue is that this is innate coffee locking. If you have a way to remove exhaustion, such as Greater Restoration, whenever the party has a long rest, the sorcerer can instead just do 8 short rests to generate 32 sorcery points, and then turn them all into spell slots. Again, this is very easy for the DM to ban, but it's not good to see. This feature needs some fixing. At 18th level, you get what I'm going to pronounce as Arcane Apotheosis. No idea if that's right. This lets you know Wish for free, means that you never lose the ability to cast it, and lets you cast any spell in the game by using the relevant spell slot, rather than having to use your 9th level slot, although you can only do that once per day. This is obviously insane. It's Wish. I don't really think I need to say any more. Finally, at 20th level, you get an Epic Boon, and +2, which can go above 20, but it must go into Charisma. In the previous UAs, this +2 could go anywhere, however in this one they've decided to lock which stat you can choose. That's probably fine with the Sorcerer, but I'm not a fan for all classes. For example, you might be playing an Eldritch Knight who wants to increase Intelligence, or you might be playing a Valor Bard who wants to increase Dexterity. I prefer this +2 to be a free choice, just in case people have weird builds. Now, I've talked about Sorcerer getting quite a few free spells here, so in total they get 5 automatic spells and a cantrip, in addition to their 22 chosen spells. That means that overall a 20th level sorcerer will now have 12 more spells known than in 2014. That's massive. Now though, I'm going to go back to Metamagic. You get this at 2nd level now, which is very nice. You get the sorcerer's defining feature earlier. Great. You also get 3 picks and can change one every long rest, and you also get another 3 at 13th level rather than getting an additional 1 at 10th and 17th. This just means more options and more versatility, and that's always a good thing. Most of the Metamagic options have had updates, so let's take a look. Careful spell is fairly basic. It's had a line added saying that the targets take no damage. This is great. It means that you can now use both Hypnotic Pattern and Fireball around your allies with absolutely no worries at all. Distant spells range got changed a little bit. Rather than doubling your range, it now adds 30 times your sorcerer level. This is worse at low levels, but better at mid and high levels. Distant spell was never really one of the standouts in my opinion though, and this doesn't really change that feeling all that much. The fact that you can swap to this on a long rest could be situationally useful though. Let's imagine you needed to sneak into the castle to talk to the princess. Rather than doing that, you could now take a long rest, get distant spell, and then use message to communicate with her from all the way across the castle moat. Empowered spell got a small rewrite, but no mechanical changes. Now that we have 3 choices though, this is a lot easier to fit on your character sheet however. Extended spell now gives advantage on concentration saves in addition to its normal effect. That's actually really useful, and I can see a lot of sorcerers picking this up. Warcaster from expert classes is now a half feat, and so is pretty much objectively the best feat for casting classes, but extended spell is still useful before then, or if you decided to pick a different feat instead. Heightened spell now costs 2 sorcery points instead of 3, and that's probably a good change. It was a bit too expensive before. Quicken spell is functionally identical, but they've added some text explaining that you can't cast other leveled spells. This is already the case though, so it doesn't really need to be written here, which suggests to me that they are considering changing the bonus action casting restrictions. This is of course speculation, but being able to Misty Step and cast Wall of Force in the same turn would be really nice. Seeking spell is identical. I think that this one is too expensive honestly. It should have probably been reduced to 1 sorcery point. Subtle spell is up next, and this allows you to now skip non-consumed material components. This actually includes costly material components, so you don't need the 1000 GP focus for scrying or whatever. This just makes Subtle even better than it was, which is nice, because I've always liked Subtle. Transmuted spell is the same as 2014, which I actually find a bit weird. Sorcerer's Burst also had Psychic as an option, so I would have expected them to add Psychic to Transmuted as well. I don't think it's an especially big deal though. Transmuted isn't exactly a top pick, but it does feel like it might be a mistake. This one is another one which benefits greatly from the fact that you can long rest switch out. Let's say that you know that you're going into a red dragon's lair. You could now switch to Transmuted to turn your fireball into a thunderball or whatever so the dragon isn't immune. Last one is Twinned spell, and this one has actually had a full makeover and is now quite a bit worse than it was before, although I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Now, when you cast a spell 2 turns in a row, you can spend sorcery points instead of the spell slot on the second casting. This is not especially useful except in the case of blast spells. You can now cast Fireball 3 times instead of twice at 2nd level. It does cost half of your sorcery points though. Twinned has honestly been entirely gutted. It was very powerful before, but I don't think that it needed to be changed entirely. It did need a nerf, but it should have probably just had some limitation put on your concentration instead, such as just giving you a disadvantage or maybe even forcing a save every single turn. I don't think this new version is bad, I just think it was probably an overcorrection. Overall, I think that the majority of Metamagic options are much better balanced against each other. Careful, Heightened, Quickened and Subtle are all top class options. Distant, Extended and Transmuted are all good situational switch outs. Empowered and Seeking are decent for the Blaster build's 3rd choice, and Twinned gives you slightly cheaper extra castings. All of them have their place, which says to me that they are well balanced. Finally, let's quickly run through the Draconic subclass. Draconic Resilience is at 3rd level now, and its AC is more like the Barbarian and Monk's Unarmoured Defense. It calculates your AC as 10 plus Dex plus Cha. That's almost certainly better than before. It doesn't affect anyone who is planning to get armor anyway, but it's good for people who just want their sorcerer to wear robes or whatever. It also still gives you the plus 1 HP per level, which is pretty nice. Draconic Speech is also at 3rd level, and it now gives you mutual communication with all dragons instead of giving you Draconic. Not sure how impactful this change is, but it's a ribbon anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. They did remove the situational expertise effect though, which is a bit odd. Elemental Affinity lets you choose your dragon type at 6th level instead of 1st, which is probably good for new players who don't really know what they're doing at 1st level. It also no longer requires you to spend a sorcery point to get resistance, which I think is a very good change. Other subclasses don't require you to spend resources, so this one shouldn't either. Draconic Exhalation is a new feature at 10th level, and it turns your fairly mediocre Sorcerer's Burst cantrip into a fairly good AoE. It's a pretty short cone at only 15 feet, but this massively boosts Sorcerer's Burst's damage. It does require you to use your Elemental Affinity damage type though, so if you chose Cold for example, you could only do something like, I don't know, a Snow Exhalation. Finally, Dragon Wings at 14 got a nerf. It now requires you to be concentrating on Sorcery Incarnate rather than being always on. It does give you a 15-foot aura to deal damage equal to your Charisma modifier, but I don't think this saves Sorcery Incarnate. I'd probably prefer to just upcast Fly to 5th level, so me and 2 of my friends can fly around all together. I don't think that nerfing Dragon Wings was a bad decision. I'm personally hoping that all permanent flight options get nerfed. But it's just not very good now, so is kind of an unfortunate capstone. Draconic is overall slightly better than before, but I don't think it meets the likes of Divine Soul, Clockwork, or even Shadow. Thanks for watching. I hope this helped your understanding of the new Sorcerer. I really like most of this, with my only real complaints being that Sorceress Restoration needs a rewrite. I wish it could choose your spell list, and Sorcery Incarnate is just a bit crap really. I'm not entirely sure which class to do next. I need a bit more time to think on the Warlock, but the Barbarian, Fighter and Wizard are all fair game. So tell me what you want to see and subscribe so you don't miss it. If you want to support me further, I have a Patreon in the description. Thanks to SK for signing up already. Alternatively, if you want the free option, I'd really appreciate it if you could share this video with your friends. Bye!